Welcome to online class 9th standard, first language English. The lesson topic, that is 7th unit, prose on saying please. Author is A.G. Gardiner. Author is A.G. Gardiner. Here, to tell about the author, A.G. Gardiner, that is A.G. Gardiner, Gardiner. So, about the author, he is Alfred George Gardiner. His lifetime is 1865 to 1946. He was a British journalist and author. His essays written under the pen name that is Alpha of the Plough, are highly regarded. He was also chairman of the National Anti-Sweating League, a pressure group which campaigned for a minimum wage in industry. The essay on saying please opens with an instance of a young liftman in the city office who threw a passenger out of his lift for not saying the word please. The latter wanted to go to the top floor of the building and he would not say top place. This annoyed the liftman who threw the passenger out of his lift. The act cost the liftman his job. So Gardiner then discusses the merits and demerits of the particular case, and then in his usual manner moves on to a discussion of politeness and its importance in the social life of a man. Okay, children, now coming to the lesson. So first they are given, that is warm-up activity. Here is a list of actions in column A and reactions in column B. Match them. So what you will do? People standing in a queue. People standing in a queue. You take your place and wait for your turn, isn't it? You dash against someone. You dash against someone. You apologize, saying sorry. Parents scolding you. When parents scolding, what you do? You put forward your reasons in a polite manner. The person at the cash counter gives you your change. You say thank you. So these are the responses to the above situation, because we should be polite with the others when we respond. Okay. Now coming to the lesson, first para. The young man, that is the young liftman, in a city office who threw a passenger out of his lift the other morning and was fined for the offense, was undoubtedly in the wrong. It was a question of please. The complainant entering the lift said top. The liftman demanded top please, and this concession being refused, he not only declined to comply with the instruction, but hurled the passenger out of the lift. This, of course, was carrying a comment on manner too far. Discourtesy is not a legal offense, and it does not excuse assault and battery. If a burglar breaks into my house and I knock him down, the law will acquit me. And if I am physically assaulted, it will permit me to retaliate with the reasonable violence. It does this because the burglar and my assailant have broken quiet, definite commands of the law, but no legal system could attempt to legislate against bad manners or could sanction the use of violence against something which it does not itself recognize as a legally punishable offense. And whatever our sympathy with the liftman, we must admit that the law is reasonable. It would never do if we were at liberty to box people's ears because we did not like their behavior or the tone of their voices or the scowl on their faces. Our fists could never be idle, and the gutters of the city would run with blood all day. So, children, the writer gives an example of an incident that is in the first paragraph in the city life where the liftman threw away a person who insulted that is a person who insulted him by treating him as a social inferior because only a liftman no. The person was demanding top. The liftman asked for a top please. It led to a bitter quarrel and it was just a matter of please. The elevator was punished for breaking a definite rule of law by throwing the passenger out, that is out of the lift. The law does not authorize someone to use aggression when anyone else is discourteous. Discourtesy should never be responded with a discourtesy. If a burglar breaks into one's house, the law allows the house owner to knock him down. If one is assaulted physically, one can retaliate accordingly. Both have broken the law, but the law does not allow us to box the ears of the persons who bears bad manners because bad manners are not put in the category of legal offense. We must admit that law is reasonable. It would never do if we do not like their behavior or the tone of their voices or the scowl on their faces. City would run with blood all day. So city gutters will be filled with the blood all day if we start boxing each other. Okay, the second para is telling, it may be as uncivil as I may please, and the law will protect me against violent retaliation. I may be haughty or boorish, and there is no penalty to pay except the penalty of being written down as an ill-mannered fellow. The law does not compel me to say please or to attune my voice to other people's sensibilities any more than it says that I shall not wax my mustache or dye my hair or wear ringlets down my back. It does not recognize the laceration of our feelings as a case of a compensation. There is no allowance for moral and intellectual damages in these matters. So, children, second para is telling That is about the author. The second para is telling that is in the second para the author says that the only penalty one has to pay for being rude or arrogant is that people will call him a rude fellow. The legal system does not impose any restriction on manners, just as it does not impose any restriction on one's personal appearance also. That is, like waxing his mustache or dyeing his hair or wearing that is a curly lock of hair, that is called a ringlets. Ringlets means curly lock of hair down his back. So the hurting of a person's feeling is not considered a case where the person who inflicts the hurt, he must be made to pay for damages. The law has no provision for defending from moral or intellectual damages inflicted by uncouth people, that is, awkward people. Now, coming to the third para, this does not mean that the damages are negligible. It is probable that the liftman was much more acutely hurt by what he regarded as a slur upon his social standing than he would have been if he had if he had a kick on his shins, for which he could have got a legal redress. The pain of a kick on the shins soon passes away, but the pain of a wound to our self-respect or our vanity may poison a whole day. I can imagine that the liftman denied the relief of throwing the author of his wound out of the lift, brooding over the assault by the hour, and visiting it on his wife in the evening as the only way of restoring his equilibrium. For there are few things more catching than bad temper and bad manners. When Sir Anthony Absolute bullied Captain Absolute, the latter went out and bullied his man, Fag, whereupon Fag went out downstairs and kicked the page boy. Probably the man who said talk to the liftman was really only getting back on his employer who had not said good morning to him because he himself had been henpecked at breakfast by his wife, to whom the cook had been insolent because the housemaid had answered her back. We infect the world with our ill humors, bad manners, probably do more to poison the stream of the general life than all the crimes in the calendar. For one wife who gets a black eye from an otherwise good-natured husband, there are 100 who live a life of martyrdom under the shadow of a morose temper. But all the same, the law cannot become the guardian of our private manners. No decalogue could cover the vast area of offenses, and no court could administer a law which governed our social civilities, our speech, the tilt of our eyebrows, and all our moods and manners. So, children, to understand the third para, despite these facts, Gardiner asserts the damages are in no way negligible because the rude person's behavior towards the liftman might have affected him. That is, as an insult, whom it would have affected, it would have affected the liftman as an insult to his social position. This would hurt more than a kick on his shins. Shin means a bony front of the lower leg. He may get the law to act against the one who has kicked him. The pain of the kick soon passes away, but the wound caused to one's self-respect does not heal easily. So Gardiner imagines how the liftman must have brooded over the insult and how upon returning home, he must have given vent to his anger upon his wife in the evening. So bad manners easily infect people who across it. And the author gives an example from the play. That is, the play name is Rivals, The Rivals by Sheridan. To illustrate this point, in the play, Sir Anthony Absolute bullies his son who gets annoyed and passes on his annoyance to his personal servant Fag, who in turn goes and kicks one of the loyal servants, that is the page boy, in his household. So, children, in the same way, the problem might have begun with the housemaid who had been rude to the cook. As a result, he had been rude to his mistress. Consequently, she might have passed her annoyance to her husband, who ultimately passed his annoyance by being rude to the liftman. So, bad manners are highly contagious and poison our life in general than the recognized legal crimes. If a woman is boxed by the gentle husband, there are many. There are many more who suffer in silence from bad temper. But law cannot do anything in this regard. Law cannot do in this regard also. And no decalogue could make a list of all the harm inflicted by manners, moods, facial expressions, and speech. So, fourth para is telling, but though we are bound to endorse the verdict against the liftman, most people will have a certain sympathy with him. While it is true that there is no law that compels us to say please, there is a social practice much older and much more sacred than any law which enjoins us to be civil. And the first requirement of civility is that we should acknowledge a service, please and thank you for the small change with which we pay our way as a social beings. They are the little courtesies by which we keep the machine of life oiled sweetly. They put our intercourse upon the basis of a friendly cooperation and a easy give and take instead of on the basics of superiors dictating to inferiors. It is a very vulgar mind that would wish to command where he can have the service of asking and have it with a willingness and good feeling instead of a resentment. So, children, fourth parents telling, even though people support the law in the case of the liftman, but they feel paradoxically sympathy. They feel paradoxically sympathy for the liftman because the law cannot compel us to use expressions such as please. There is a social practice more sacred than any law. One such a custom of a civilized man is what he should do. He should acknowledge a service by telling please and thank you. They are the small tips we pay on our journey through life as a civilized human beings living in a civil society. And their little courtesies allow us to live in society like oil to the engines without any friction. These words help to keep friendly cooperation between human beings instead of dividing us into superiors dictating to inferiors. The author says that only a vulgar person will order for a service by merely asking, whereas a request will provide the service with goodwill, but order might provide service, but only with a resentment. That is a feeling you won't be happy to do. Then fifth para is telling, I should like to feature in this connection my friend, that is the polite conductor. By this discriminating title, I do not intend to suggest a rebuke to conductors generally. On the contrary, I'm disposed to think there are few classes of men who come through the ordeal of a very trying calling better than bus conductors do. Here and there, you will meet an unpleasant specimen who regards the passengers as his natural enemies, as creatures whose purpose on the bus is to cheat him, and who can only be kept reasonably honest by a loud voice and an aggressive manner. But this type is rare, rarer than it used to be. I fancy the public owes much to the Underground Railway Company, which also runs the buses for insisting on a certain standard of civility in its servants and taking care that that standard is observed. In doing this, it not only makes things pleasant for the traveling public, but performs an important social service. Social service. So this para is telling Gardiner wishes to give one more example. That is a friend of his whom he calls the polite conductor. He has nothing against the conductors by telling this, but he tells that there are few who work better than the bus conductors' job. That is, some regard the passengers as his natural enemies, whose purpose on the bus is only to cheat him. He thinks that by shouting in an aggressive manner, he can control the public, and the public can be kept honest also. But such specimens are few now. Underground Railway Company, who manages the bus service, imposes a certain standard of polite behavior in its servants who work for them. By doing this, they make things pleasant for the traveling public and performs an important social service. Now, coming to the sixth para, that is, it is not therefore with any feeling of friendliness to conductors as a class that I pay a tribute to a particular member of that class. I first became conscious of his existence one day when I jumped onto a bus and found that I had left home without any money in my pocket. Oh, everyone has had the experience and knows the feeling, the mixed feeling which the discovery arouses. You are annoyed because you look like a fool at the best and like a knave at the worst. You would not be at all surprised if the conductor eyed you coldly as much as to say, yes, I know that stale old trick. Now then, off you get. And even if the conductor is a good fellow and lets you down easily, you are faced with the necessity of going back and the inconvenience perhaps of missing your train or your engagement. So, what happens? Further, Gardiner tells about his first interaction with the polite conductor. One day, he boarded the bus without any money in his pocket. This experience is common to most people, and one feels either like a fool or a crook. One almost expects the conductor to look at him suspiciously and imply that this is a common trick played by crooks, and he asks to get off the bus. Even if the conductor believes and is kind, still he is still left with the necessity of going home for his valet, wasting a lot of time and not being able to do what he had set out to do. So, children, seventh para is telling, having searched my pockets in vain for stray coppers and having found I was utterly penniless, I told the conductor with an honest face, as I could assume, that I couldn't pay the fare and must go back for money. Oh, you needn't get off. That's all right, said he. All right, said I, but I haven't a copper on me. Oh, I will book you through, he replied. Where do you want to go? He handled his bundle of tickets with the air of a man who was prepared to give me a ticket for anywhere from the bank to Hong Kong. I said it was very kind of him and told him where I wanted to go. And as he gave me the ticket, I said, "But where shall I send the fare?" "Oh, you will see me someday, all right," he said cheerfully as he turned to go. And then, luckily, my fingers still wandering in the corners of my pockets lighted on a shilling and the account was squared. But the fact it did not lessen the glow of a pleasure which so good natured an action had given me. So, what happened? Seventh para is telling, finding no coins at all in his pocket, the author tells the conductor that he must go back home to fetch some money. At this, the conductor tells him that he does not need to get off. Flourishing his bundle of tickets, he asks the destination and hands him the ticket. When the passenger asks where the money to be sent, the conductor cheerfully replies that he is bound to meet the passenger someday on some bus. Luckily, the author found a coin in his pocket at last and managed to pay the fare. Such good natured action on the part of the conductor gave him the glow of pleasure and did not diminish even a tiny bit. Now, eighth para, coming to the eighth para, in a few days, that is a few days later, my most sensitive toe was trampled on rather heavily as I sat reading on the top of a bus. I looked up with some anger and more agony and saw my friend of the cheerful countenance. "Sorry, sir," he said. "I know these are heavy boots. Got them because my own feet get trod on so much. And now I am treading on other people's. Hope I didn't hurt you, sir." He had hurt me, but he was so nice about it that I assured him he hadn't. After this, I began to observe him whenever I boarded his bus and found a curious pleasure in the constant good nature of his bearing. He seemed to have an inexhaustible fund of patience and a gift for making his passengers comfortable. I noticed that if it was raining, he would run up the stairs to give someone the tip that there was a room inside. With old people, he was as considerate as a son, and with the children, as solicitous as a father. And he had even evidently a peculiarly warm place in his heart for young people, and always indulged in some merry jest with them. If he had a blind man on board, it wasn't enough to set him down safely on the pavement. He would call to Bill in front to wait while he took him across the road or round the corner, or otherwise safely on his way. In short, I found that he irradiated such an atmosphere of good temper and kindliness, that a journey with him was a lesson in natural courtesy and good manners. So, this eighth era is telling, a few days later, it so happened the same conductor accidentally stepped on the author's toe, causing him much pain as he sat reading on the top of a bus. The cheerful conductor was quick to apologize, saying that he had got those heavy boots on because his toes were often trod on. Yet, ironically, he himself was new, as ironically, he himself was now stepping on people's toes. When he asked Gardiner if we were hurt, the author reassured him that he was not, even though he was. The fact that is illustrated here is the effect of politeness and how good behavior evinces good behavior. That is, if you show good behavior, it will give good behavior only. From that incident onwards, the author begins to take note of the polite conductor and his actions. He seems to have a limitless supply of patience and goodwill towards his passengers. be it by letting people on the top know that there are seats lower down when it rains, or caring as a son to the elderly and as a father to children. And he cracks jokes with young people to make them laugh, or to set down a blind person on the footpath and safely on his way. The polite conductor always The polite conductor always exuded such good temper and kindness that the author says a journey with him taught one what natural courtesy and good manners were. And coming to the ninth para, what struck me particularly was with ease, what struck me particularly was the ease with which he got through his work. If bad manners are infectious, so also are good manners. If we encounter incivility, most of us are apt to become uncivil. But it is unusually an uncouth person who can be disagreeable with the sunny people. It is with manners as with the weather. Nothing clears up my spirit like a fine day, said Keats. And a cheerful person descends on even the gloomiest of us with something of the benediction of a fine day. And so it was always fine, whether on the polite conductor's bus and his own civility, his conciliatory address and good humored bearing infected his passengers. In lightening their spirits, he lightened his own task. His gaiety was not a wasteful luxury, but a sound investment. So, coming to the ninth para, Gardiner explains further the benefit of such behavior, that is good behavior. The polite conductor never had any difficulty in doing his work. Just as rudeness begets rudeness, likewise, a sunny disposition begets pleasantness in others. The poet Keats also had claimed that he always felt cheerful when the weather was sunny. So Gardiner says cheerful people come to us like the blessing of sunny weather. Consequently, the atmosphere inside the particular conductor's bus was always pleasant. His politeness, readiness to accommodate, and his pleasant manner of conducting himself resulted in making his passengers happy, which in turn made his own work easy. Hence, Gardiner points out that his politeness was not a waste but a very good investment. Then 10th para, coming to this 10th para, it is telling it is a matter of general agreement that the war has had a chilling effect upon those little everyday civilities of behavior that sweeten the general air. We must get those civilities back if we are to make life kindly and tolerable for each other. We cannot get them back by invoking the law. The policeman is a necessary symbol, and the law is a necessary institution for a society that is still somewhat lower than the angels. But the law can only protect us against a material attack, nor will the liftman's way of meeting the moral affront by physical violence help us to restore the civilities. I suggest to him that he would have had a mere he would have had a more subtle and effective revenge if he had treated the gentleman who would not say please with elaborate politeness. He would have had the victory not only over the boor but over himself, and that is the victory that counts. The policeman may lose the material advantage, but he always has the spiritual victory. I commend to the lived man a story of Chesterfield. In this time, that in his time, the London streets were without the pavements of today. And the man who took the wall had the driest footing. I never give the wall to a scoundrel, said the man who met Chesterfield one day in the street. I always do, said Chesterfield, stepping with a bow into the road. I hope the liftman will agree that his revenge was much more sweet than if he had flung the fellow into the mud. So, children, the last para is giving good explanation of civility. That is what A.G. Gardiner wants the people do. There is a general feeling that the world war has taken away from man's daily life. That is the use of civility which made life sweet earlier. Gardiner wants to get back those civilities to make life with one another easier. This cannot be done with the policeman or the law. The policeman is a necessary symbol. The law is also a necessary institution for creatures like man. The law can only protect us from physical injury. The liftman's way of retaliating against rudeness with physical violence too is ineffectual. So, Gardiner suggests that if rudeness were to be replied with the excessive politeness, he would have had an effective revenge. He would have had a moral superiority. He may lose the material advantage, but he always has the spiritual victory. He recounts the story of Chesterfield for the edification of the liftman. There was a time when the streets of the city were very muddy. The only way of keeping one's shoes clean was by walking as close as possible to the wall, where a very narrow strip of ground was a little higher than the rest of the road. Here, Chesterfield came face to face with an uncouth fellow who refused to step into the mud to allow Chesterfield to pass. I never give the wall to a scoundrel, he said. Immediately, Chesterfield stopped into the mud. Immediately Chesterfield stepped into the mud with a bow, saying, I always do. Gardiner hopes that the liftman will understand his revenge was much more sweet than if he had flung fellow into the mud. So, like this, children, please go through this and then understand and make your life also easy and happy. Thank you, children.